These days, I'm really trying to embrace a buy fewer things but make them fabulous philosophy, because my closet has previously been what experts might call a graveyard of questionable impulse purchases. Enter quints. They make the kind of pieces that instantly feel like the grown-up version of your wardrobe. Beautiful fabrics, flattering cuts, and the kind of effortless style that makes it look like you have your life together, even if you obviously do not. For example, my very generous mother just took myself and our family to Europe for spring break, and I wanted to, look stylish and European, and I didn't have the accessories. So I went to quints.com and I got 2 key pieces specifically for this trip. An Italian leather diamond stitch sling in black, because I didn't want to bring like a fanny pack and a purse. So this is like a upscale fanny pack. And I looked pretty stylish, I think. What's also cool about quints is that it works directly with safe, ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen. So you're getting luxury level quality without the markup, which means you can look expensive or fancy or European without having to emotionally process that credit card bill. Quints is consistently rated 4.5 to 5 stars by thousands of customers, which feels correct. Once you start wearing their stuff, you realize the secret isn't about having more clothes, it's about having better ones. So right now, go to quints.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's a full year to wear it and love it, and you will. Now available in Canada too. Woot woot. Oh, Canada. And don't keep settling for clothes that don't last. Go to quinc.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quints.com/culty. Happy shopping.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back to A Little Bit Culty, everyone.
Today's guest is fascinating. Nancy Ross is an associate professor and department chair at Utah Tech University, where she spent nearly 2 decades researching LDS women, women's ordination movements, and Mormon feminism. Her forthcoming book, Mormon Garments, Sacred and Secret, pulls back the curtain on one of the most intimate and least discussed Latter-day Saint practices, the requirement that adult members wear religious garments under their clothes day and night.
Drawing on survey responses from over 4,500 church members, Nancy shows how garments operate as both sacred symbol and social control, especially around sexuality, shaping behavior, reinforcing conformity, and entangling belief, gender, shame, and obedience in really complicated ways.
At the heart of her argument is the idea that garments began as a symbol of 19th century Mormon polygamy and evolved into a religious technology for restraining the sexual behavior of Mormon adults in the 20th century. In her work, she pushes for more honest conversation and greater understanding of what it means to live inside that tension between personal identity and religious expectation.
We learned a lot in this episode, and we hope you enjoyed as much as we did. Here's part 1 with Nancy Ross.
Nancy, welcome to A Little Bit Culty.
Thank you for having me.
Another Mormon episode.
Another Mormon episode. We seem to just love this topic. Well, it's, it's a big part of American culture.
I mean, I think we're kind of cool in the American media landscape at the moment, the former Mormons.
Yes. And
yeah, you guys are getting the hip and cool vibe.
That's right. That's right.
Savor the flavor.
Which is never a thing that has happened to us before. So, this is great.
So enjoy it. It can turn on you quickly. I mean,
I'd love to hear how that happened. But first, for those people who don't know you and your work, can you give us, like, when people meet you and they ask, what do you do? And what's your story? What's the Cliff Notes?
So I am a professor here in Southern Utah. My husband is also a professor here in Southern Utah. We have been living here for 20 years. We met in grad school. And soon after I arrived in Utah, where I had never lived before, I started realizing that my experience of gender and Southern Utah was really different than other locations I had lived in, and it became very difficult. And so as a result of that, I started studying gender and Mormonism. I've participated in the Mormon feminist community for probably coming up to 20 years now, and I'm no longer LDS, but I still participate in the Mormon feminist community, and I do research into Mormon studies.
Okay, great. So you were raised Mormon.
Yeah, both of my parents were converts to the church. My mother in her teenage years in England, and my father in his 20s. And then they met at church in England, got married, had me, and moved to Maine. And so I grew up as a Mormon in central Maine. And that's kind of the beginning of my story.
Mormon in central Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my angle. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different Mormon story than maybe, your Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, with these, views of northern Utah. But in central Maine, the church was really small. Our congregation probably covered a geographical area that was like, you could probably drive from one side of the ward to the other side of the congregation, the geographical boundaries, for like an hour. And it was a very tight-knit, small community. And that was, people talk about Utah Mormonism having a particular flavor, but the flavor of Mormonism in Maine that I grew up with was very small-knit community. And we grew up doing everything with the people in our congregation. And there are a lot of good memories, even as there are a lot of challenging memories as well.
How often was your interface, or what was your interface with people outside the community? Was it more than, say, someone in Utah?
So here in Utah, if you're a member of the LDS Church, then there's a good chance that your neighbors are all part of your congregation, because there are these geographical boundaries and everybody has to attend the congregation that they're kind of assigned to based on where you live. But growing up in Maine, that was very different. I grew up in a Catholic, French-speaking neighborhood in central Maine, where everybody in our neighborhood was Catholic and going to Catholic school. And in our household, we were Mormons going to public school, and our next door neighbors were also Jehovah's Witnesses going to public school. So like a very different kind of feel. So there wasn't the sense that growing up in Maine that our neighbors or our like local geographic community were also LDS. It was more like we were a very small minority of a religious minority in Maine. And that's a very different kind of experience. But my identity was no less formed around that, different dynamic, right? Like as, kind of focused on Mormonism because of the kind of minority status in the community.
Now, in a normal episode that doesn't focus on the history, as we're going to get into, of the garments and your forthcoming book, would get more into, your life and what was great about it and the red flags and all that stuff. But we're going to condense that a little bit so we can get to your book. Let's focus on the garments. What was your relationship like to the garments? And when did you start wearing them? And when did you, and then we'll get to how you decided to not wear the garments.
Yeah. So I would have said that my orientation to like belief generally was that I kind of grew up very much as a people pleaser, the oldest child in a family that struggled in a number of ways with a lot of things. So needing to be like that strong older sister type and to follow all the rules. That was definitely my role in our family and in our community. And so when I got to grad school and I met my husband at church, as you do when you're a Mormon, and, after dating for like 4 months, we get engaged, which is just really normal.
What you do.
It's what you do in Mormonism. And then I need to, before we get married, and we were going to be sealed or married sealed in Mormon speak here in St. George, where I live now in Utah. We were going to fly from England but I go through what's called like taking out your endowments. So it's the kind of big ceremony, the temple ceremony that people go through where they receive their garments and where they make particular commitments in advance of typically getting married or going on a mission or some kind of like, it's kind of like a becoming adult ceremony very much in Mormonism. The endowment is represented a little bit on TV shows like, what's that one with, sorry, the name is escaping me. But temples, Mormon temples are closed spaces. And so the rituals that happen inside them are hidden from outside view under the banner of heaven. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Right. So, under the banner of heaven, there are some glimpses of Mormon temple ceremonies. And so those are hidden where church services on a Sunday are open events and anybody can attend. What happens in temples is kind of closed off. It is hidden from the outside view. You've got to go through a series of getting approval and being interviewed about your faith and your practice, your kind of personal habits and your practices. Before being given permission to go and do rituals in the temple. And so about 5 weeks before I get married, I go through the temple. I take what's called taking out your endowments for the first time. I go through this particular process, and I am 23 at this time. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cambridge. I'm in a PhD program for art history. There's often, right, a kind of mistaken sense that people who might engage in such things or, become involved with groups that are a little bit culty are going to be ignorant or, uneducated. But this did not describe me, and it did not describe my husband or many of the other church members that we knew. I was in grad school, I was at a top educational establishment, and I am going through this experience. And one of the things that happens is that as I am about to do this, I know very little about these ceremonies. So I know very little about the initiatory where I will receive garments. And I only have a vague sense of what's going to happen in the endowment, where I know that I'm going to need to make covenants and promises to God and the community, but I don't actually have a clear sense of what those are. And at the same time, it's like, if I don't do this, if I don't go and do these ceremonies, then I cannot get married to my husband, which I very much want to do. And I've been raised my whole life to understand that whatever happens in the temple is basically the pinnacle of my church experience, right? Like it is the best and most exciting and most revelatory and one of the greatest things that can happen. It is this space that is like the space of heaven. And it is just this place where people describe feeling peace, but I don't actually know what goes on in these ceremonies. And so there's a lot of excitement and nervousness, and I'm looking forward to getting married. But at the same time, I've got to go do this thing. And I know that afterwards, I'm going to have to wear garments for the rest of my life, which are the sacred underwear of the LDS tradition. And I don't super love that idea, but I also recognize that this is what it means to be an adult in my community. And I want that. And I am also believing in the things that I have been taught all of my life. I would say that, I was a very devout kid. And, I prayed every day on my own, and I read scriptures and on my own. And I was really committed to the things of my faith, which had been a big defining part of my life, because I grew up in a community where most teenagers and friends that I had were not Mormon and are all around me. But this religious identity was really meaningful and important to me. And so, of course, I want to continue progressing in that tradition and becoming an adult in that tradition. And so this is all, kind of leading to this moment of going through the temple for the first time.
Let's take a break from the cultiverse, shall we? Here's a word from our sponsors.
If you love the ritual of a little evening drink, but could really do without the fuzzy head and questionable life choices the next morning, meet Vesper from Peak. It's a non-alcoholic, adaptogenic aperitif that keeps the ritual, the romance, and the cheers moment just without the alcohol. Vesper is made with calming ingredients like L-theanine, tart cherry, lemon balm, and elderflower, so you actually feel your body relax, your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, the whole vibe shifts, but it's not sleepy or dull. Botanicals like gentian and damiana give you a subtle lift so you feel social, present, and maybe even a little flirty. Flavor-wise, it's lovely. Sour cherry, bright grapefruit citrus, and herbal bitters. Pour it over ice, top it with sparkling water, light a candle. Suddenly, your Tuesday night feels a little more like a European vacation. In fact, it's the drink that lets you stay fully present for the conversation, the connection, the moment, and still wake up feeling amazing the next day, which I have to because, for example, tomorrow I have a full day of baseball for both kids, but I'm going over to see a friend tonight, and we are planning to do a Korean skincare spa night. And while I would probably normally bring some rosé, tonight I'm bringing the Vesper. Vesper makes it still like a fun night, and we can do the face masks and all that and cheers, but I know that I'll be able to get through my big sports day tomorrow, and that's what I need. Set a new standard for how you relax and connect. Access 10% off for life and redefine your nightly ritual today at peaklife.com/culty. That's PIQUE life.com/culty. Enjoy. Can we talk about that moment when you look around your house and think, how did this room slowly turn into a storage unit with throw pillows? Same. That's why we love Wayfair. It's our go-to when we want to refresh our space and actually make it work better for real life, not just Instagram life. From furniture and decor to organization solutions and outdoor essentials, they make it ridiculously easy to find pieces that fit your style and your budget. Our vibe is contemporary but comfortable and aggressively kid-friendly, so we need things that look elevated but can survive snack time and science projects. Wayfair's filters, reviews, and visual tools make it easy to find the right fit. Whether you're upgrading the living room, dialing in the podcast room, or rethinking the kids' spaces. Right now, we are so pumped about a little console table that I got for right beside the front door. From when you walk in, you need a place to put your keys and your sunglasses and a couple grab-and-go things and all the random stuff you need when you're walking out the door. Up until recently, all that stuff was just everywhere, and now it's in one little space. Thanks, Wayfair. Also, Wayfair has thousands of 5-star reviews. Yes, please. Fast shipping? Love it. And if you don't feel like deciphering assembly instructions that read like a riddle, they even offer installation services. Wayfair makes it easy to create a home that feels pulled together without pulling your hair out. Find furniture, decor, and essentials that fit your unique style and budget. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. I used to think that building a really high-quality wardrobe meant either selling a kidney or living in yoga pants forever. And then I found Quince. And honestly, I'm so grateful. And I really needed to update my wardrobe because my mother is so generously taking us to Europe for spring break, and I needed a few things, needed. So I just ordered a cream Mongolian cashmere crewneck sweater, perfect to go with the jeans I got last month, also from Quince, the transit quilted commuter backpack, and a cotton cashmere ribbed turtleneck bodysuit, also to go with the jeans. Not only did they arrive in just a few days while I was panic shopping for this trip, but they are perfect for the current end of winter, almost spring vibe, and the backpack is the cutest and most perfect accessory for bopping around the city and schlepping snacks and water bottles while still looking Parisian and chic. And here's a great bonus. They skipped the middleman markup. No paying for some brands' fancy Fifth Avenue rent. Just quality clothing from ethical factories that'll survive more than 3 trips through the wash. Thousands of people rate their stuff 4.5 to 5 stars because, shocker, it actually holds up. The stitching, the fit, everything. And you can look effortlessly cool. Check out my Europe post to see all my cute fits and see if you agree. Right now, go to quince.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's a full year to wear it and love it. And now you will. Now available in Canada too. Don't keep settling for clothes that don't last. Go to quince.com/culty for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culty.
Escape's over. Let's return to our regularly scheduled cult talk. Is it fair to say that incentives were created for you that would help you or encourage you to ignore red flags? And was that common in that atmosphere? Because you had an incentive to get married, and so maybe
Yes.
there might be some things that you would overlook because you have a destination in mind, so to speak.
Totally. And I'm going to detail some of these big red flags that come up in just a moment. As a teenager, I saw that women and men, girls and boys, were treated very differently. And that bothered me. And I remember talking to my dad about this and being like, this just doesn't feel right. And him being like, don't worry about it. Like, boys and girls need different things. Don't worry about it. I had a mom who was involved with Mormon feminism. And so I also had a sense that God was probably, can I say asshole in this podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a sense that God was not an asshole because I had a strong feeling that I had faith, and I had faith that God was not a jerk. Like, I think that's probably a reasonable thing to have faith in. And so it's like, okay, well, whatever my dad thinks or whatever our local church leaders seem to feel about boys and girls needing to be different, I had a sense that like God might not be like that, if that makes sense. I felt like I knew, and not necessarily the God who seemed to be in church teachings, like super obsessed with modesty, for example, and like whether or not I was showing my knees by wearing shorts, right? Like not that God, because that's clearly like shallow and like, you know, a weird thing to obsess about. But I felt like that the sense of God that I had would be revealed as I understood God in these ceremonies. And what was really hard was that really didn't happen. So as part of going through, there's one particular day where a friend of mine and my mother had passed away by this point. And so I did usually, like, you know, if you're a young woman, your mom would be kind of there to help you go through these, because you need an escort to go through the temple for the first time. But my fiance is there, and a friend of mine and her mom from our local congregation in Cambridge are there to help me through this experience. And I am in preparatory to kind of going through the rituals on the day. I have a meeting with an older woman whose job is like a temple matron. She's like married to the temple president, and she's giving me some like instructions about the day and about what's going to happen. And there's a moment in those instructions to like ask some questions, right? So we're in the spaces of the temple. I know that the things that happen in the temple are like sacred, and I kind of understand that as meaning secret, but it's a sacred kind of secret. And of course, that's also part of the title of my book, Mormon Garments, Sacred and Secret. And there's a moment when because I am a rule follower at this point, and I have a question about how to wear garments. And of course, my mother is not alive, so I cannot like hash out this with my mom at this point. And so I had heard from friends that while I knew that my mom had worn her bra, so we're getting into the realm of underwear here, that had worn her bra over top of her garments. So her garments were the things that were closest to her skin, and that she had worn her bra on top of that. But that didn't seem like a great arrangement of things to me, of like underwear, because I was not used to wearing clothing underneath my bra. But I'd also heard from some other friends who'd been through the temple that they had heard from some other people that it might be possible, or that there was new flexibility, that you didn't have to do it that way, that you could wear your bra under your garment. And that was seen as being like legitimate or in keeping with the rules of such things. And I am like a rule following person. And so like, all I want to know is like a clarification, right? Like, like, I'm like, just tell me what I need to do and I will do it, but I want to ask the question. And so I know that there's going to be this moment when I can ask questions. And so that particular moment arrives, and this is an older English woman, and English women are not like particularly squeamish about body things in the same way that maybe older American women might not be. Like, we cannot talk about sex and bodies. English women are usually a little more direct about such things. And so I say to this older woman, you know, in this moment when I can ask questions, you know, I explain, like, I understand that my mom wore her garments in this way, but I'm hearing from some other people that it might be legitimate to wear them in this other way. Like, what way is okay? Are these both okay? Is one of these better than the other? Like, what is the amount of flexibility that is reasonable within our religious system? And so this is right, like the one moment when I can legitimately ask this question about a very taboo practice that I'm really not supposed to be talking about in other parts of my life. And the answer I get in that moment when I am trying to do the right thing is, that is a rude question.
Oh,
really?
Yes. And so like, and I am fully prepared to follow through with whatever she says. And the answer I get is, you're not allowed to ask that question, or I wasn't expecting you to, like, some weird kind of answer. And I am shocked by that answer. And I am really, in that answer, in this moment, I feel really ashamed, because I'm like, I am just trying to do the right thing here, people, right? Like, and I just needed a little bit of clarification. And you told me, like, and I thought this would be okay to ask, and I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life. And I just needed like a little bit of information. And then I was told Like, this was just so confusing. This was just
Absolutely.
so confusing to me.
Yeah, it's confusing to me.
Right. Like, this is so confusing. But this is how I begin the process of wearing garments, which is like with a legitimate question, a like very confusing refusal to answer the question. And this is like in 2004 in London. So a very confusing response. So then I go through the initiatory ceremony. I have some sense before going through the initiatory that this might involve more nudity than I am really comfortable with. I am kind of instructed to put like what's called a shield on, and there is like a blessing of the body that happens, including maybe touching more of my body than I would normally be comfortable with allowing a stranger. I'm not given advance warning of this. It is also a very sacred moment. This day is full of like both very sacred moments that feel very special and important to me, and really confusing and very uncomfortable because I actually don't know what is about to happen. When we get to the endowment piece, where I have a vague sense of what's going to happen, and I have a vague sense that I'm going to need to make commitments, but I don't actually know what the wording of these commitments is. And at some point in the ceremony, I am effectively kind of told that, okay, we're about to make the commitment where wives obey their husbands and the husbands obey God. And I'm like, looking around the room, and I was like, I am not okay with this. Like, this is not how I would have liked this thing to have been worded. Like, I don't love this. And I also know that there are a lot of people in the room. There are a lot of people there that I know and love to support me. My husband is there. And it's like, I have to do this thing. If I am going to continue in my life and to continue to be part of this community, I have to do this thing. So I do the thing. And I have all kinds of feelings afterwards. I like my in that moment, my sense of the whole day was that like I did the thing I needed to do. And also there were some real lingering pinch points that feel very unsettling about that day. And so there was this moment in talking with the temple matron where she wouldn't answer my question. And she's kind of shaming me for asking the question. There's this moment where I have to make a covenant to obey my husband. And it's not like if he had a reciprocal covenant to like obey me and like we like obey, like I would have been okay with that, right? Like I would have been okay with like, we have to listen to each other kind of language. But this hierarchy, husbands over their wives, was not exactly what I was expecting. Because again, I really believe that God was not the jerk, or not like a sexist jerk. And there are different moments during the day when I am kind of more exposed physically. I'm a very modest person. I'm not okay with nudity, that I have to be a little more naked than I would really like to be. And there are things that I wasn't expecting to be challenging around clothing and around temple clothing that I have to engage with. And I'm like, this is feeling all kinds of things I was not expecting, and just really uncomfortable and really unexpected. And so I then go forth from that experience, kind of having a big, like that's its own milestone in advance of getting married. And so I'm able to kind of move forward with marriage. At that point, my husband and I get married. But there are these really difficult things that happen on that day, and those linger. And the way that I resolve problems, it's like, let me dive into study. You like, right, I'm going to dive into study. I am going to read the hell out of scripture. And I am going to find everything that seems to be legitimate on the temple that I could possibly find. And I am going to read it to death. And I am going to make what did not feel right. I'm going to find a way to resolve this. And so I do that.
Let's take a little break from the cultiverse. Here's a word from our sponsors.
You know that moment when it's suddenly dinner time and you open the fridge hoping inspiration magically appears, and instead it's just condiments and a lonely carrot, and you go back, you do it again, lowering your standards each time, but still the lonely carrot? Yeah, that's where ButcherBox comes in. ButcherBox delivers high-quality protein right to your door, including family favorites that make weeknight meals way easier, even for the picky eaters like our boys. Whether you're cooking something fancy like filet mignon, or just tossing chicken nuggets in the air fryer, every product meets the same rigorous standards. It's all quality across the board. For over a decade, ButcherBox has led the industry with meat and seafood that's antibiotic-free, hormone-free, and independently verified. It's the clean, trustworthy protein you want to be eating, especially at the start of a new year. And the best part? You can fully customize your box to fit your routine, your goals, and your schedule. Last week, we had chicken thighs, beautiful ribeyes, and my personal favorite for the family, the New York strip. All one less thing to think about. Shipping is always free, and members get access to recipe ideas, tips, and exclusive deals that make cooking at home easier and a lot more delicious. As an exclusive offer, new listeners can get their choice between organic ground beef, chicken breast, or shrimp in every box for a year, plus $20 off when you go to butcherbox.com/culty. That's right, your choice of organic ground beef, chicken breast, or shrimp in every box for an entire year, plus $20 off your first box and free shipping always. That's butcherbox.com/culty. Don't forget to use our link so they know who sent you.
On A Little Bit Culty, you hear about how hard it can be to spot red flags and know when to ask for help. The same goes for caring for a parent or loved one. It's a big shift when the person who raised you now needs support. With Care.com, you don't have to do it alone. Find background-checked caregivers through Care.com for anything from companionship to dementia care. You can even browse senior living communities, read real reviews, and schedule tours. If you're not sure what's best, Senior Care Advisors, who are all master's-level social workers, can help you build a plan that fits your family. 29 million families have turned to Care.com to find care that works for them. For a limited time, use the code POD20 for 20% off your initial Care.com subscription. That's POD20, all one word, good for 20% off. Start your senior care search today. When it's not you, it's Care.com.
Thank you for listening. Now, let's dive back into the cultiverse.
And moving forward, I wear garments. In England is a cold climate. And so, I make the best of it. My husband and I finish our PhDs. By the time we leave and move to St. George, I am 6 months pregnant with our first child. We have been married nearly 3 years, and we moved to the desert in southern Utah where I've never lived before. And I encounter a version of Mormonism in the community that I had also really not encountered. Like a community that is deeply committed to a gendered hierarchy. When I start teaching soon after I give birth to my child, I start adjuncting at our university where my husband teaches. And my students are always asking me who's taking, I haven't even mentioned that I've just given birth. And they are who's taking care of your children? Right. My husband has never asked who is taking care of his children, right? Our experiences very quickly become different, where his PhD is an asset and a source of status. Mine is a liability. And as a Mormon woman with a PhD who has anticipated a career and not just stay-at-home motherhood, I am trying to figure out how can I be home enough with my children to satisfy the community and family, but also live the life that I want to live.
Well, you're an outlier, it sounds like, in that community. Yeah.
Yeah, but also very much a person of faith. And it's I'm confused about I am committed to living my faith. I am confused as to why people only see educational difference and not being only a stay-at-home mom is such a problematic thing. And this just continually emerging as a source of difference. I'm the only full-time woman in my department, in an art department, and where there is no shortage of women in the arts. And so these things that I would thought would eventually become resolved do not become resolved. And of course, so by the time all of this is happening, this is late 2000s, early 2010s. I have 2 little kids. I got accidentally pregnant with my second child very quickly. So I have 2 kids in 14 and a half months. And I am trying to start a career and live my life in this place and live in the desert and, begin life, adult life. And I'm still in my mid-late 20s and working through young adulthood still, but working through young adulthood, married with a PhD, with two young children, which is very normal for being married with children is very normal for Mormons in young adulthood to be working through young adulthood but it's challenging. And of course, like everybody else I know, where do we find answers to our problems? Online and in Facebook, and so there are a number of Mormon feminist blogs that I start reading like religiously because nobody else in my everyday life has answers or even the same questions that I do, or has answers to these questions about why gendered hierarchy seems to be this thing that everybody is deeply committed to. And I live in an area where the congregation is particularly hardcore, and I wouldn't have described it at this time, but maybe like white Mormon nationalist. But I would now, and I'm trying to make my life work. And there just seem to be a lot of points of friction. And so blogs and Mormon feminist blogs become my lifeline. Eventually, there are some Mormon feminist Facebook groups that even more become my lifeline. And what I'm starting to notice is that when there were questions about garments and garment wearing in these groups, these would run into hundreds of comments. And they became just the biggest, like longest social media threads I'd ever seen. And they contained information and experiences of people talking about their garments and navigating garment wearing that had never occurred to me, were both similar to and different from my experiences. And I was just like eating popcorn, like, metaphorically, while reading these threads and being like, this is just so interesting. Eventually, someone who was later a Mormon grad student in Cambridge, who I met through this online Mormon feminist community, I saw that she'd been part of the same congregation that I'd been part of, and we connected. And then eventually she asked me, she was like, hey, do you want to write a paper on Mormon feminism? And I'm like, sure. And so we end up surveying the Mormon feminist community in Facebook and publishing some papers on that. And then that goes really well, and we become really good friends. And through that experience, and this feels like a kind of peer mentoring and peer learning and collaboration that I had never quite had before. And so we're looking around for our next projects, and this is about late 2013, early 2014. And then we kind of realized that, what, we should do garments. We should survey people about their experiences with garments. And we had a survey experience by that point. We've been able to get 1,800 responses for our first survey. And we're like, wow, what if we got 500 people to tell us in an anonymous survey what they experienced with their garments? We could write a paper, and that would turn into a journal article, and then we could move on with the rest of our lives. But that would be a really awesome thing. And we're like, let's do that. And so we do this. And at that point, there had not been a lot of surveying of Mormons on Facebook or in social media. There's been a lot more since then. And I have participated in a number of projects that do exactly that. But what happened is that when our survey dropped within a week, and we posted it on all the blog, partnered with blogs and in our Facebook groups, but also trying to capture a big swath of Mormon experience. So we contacted some very conservative Facebook pages for Mormon women. And, we're like, can you post our survey? And then they post it being like, the liberal Mormons are misrepresenting Mormonism. Right. So it is your conservative Mormon women, it is your religious duty to take this survey. And so very quickly, this thing takes off. Within a week, we get 4,500 responses.
What? Wow.
Of adults who have taken our survey. We have so much more data than we actually know how to process at this time.
So can I ask, at this point, is it a consensus that it's abusive? Is it a consensus that it's oppressive? Are you just getting a spectrum of opinions on it? I mean, to you, it's clear, right?
Well, it actually isn't clear because
that's kind of
my partner, so my collaborative partner and one of my co-authors in this project, Jessica Finnegan. Mm-hmm. So at the time in which we do this, we are all in Mormonism. Jessica has 4 children. I have 2 children. We are trying to make our lives work and some kind of version of academia work in our lives.
Right.
I am like a teacher. I can't remember if at this point, if I was teaching in the women's meeting or in the children's church, our primary in Mormon speak, right? We are very involved Mormons who are wearing garments, but we realize at this point in our lives that we do not, and this was part of the conversation leading up to creating the survey. And I would have kind of described this as, I don't like my garments. I don't like how they feel. I did not like being pregnant in southern Utah and nursing with garments. These were particularly difficult experiences.
Right.
The sensory issues that we were both experiencing with garments were something that just continued to grate and become more noticeable over time. So there was a sense that like, okay, we don't like this.
But you were still faithful.
Yeah, but we were still faithful.
Yeah.
And our question was really, are our personal experiences, which we have not spent much time talking about with people
Because you're not allowed to.
Because we're not allowed to. Right, exactly.
It's rude.
And so this is why we love the kind of online discussions that kind of get into this territory. And we're trying to figure out if our experiences are like similar or different or typical or not typical, or are we just, does everybody else fine with garments and we are just like uniquely not fine with garments? There was a sense that the discomfort that I think we were both experiencing, it was more than physical, but we were struggling to name that. So it's like, we need to grow a conversation.
I love that we started with your story because I think it's so important to set up like where the survey comes from and all of that, and your trajectory is so interesting. And I realized that I think it's important before we take a break and in the second part of the episode, get into the history and some of the findings of the book, which I found utterly fascinating. I don't want to take for granted that somebody who's maybe listening for the first time and hasn't heard our other episodes about the Mormon Church. Sidebar, we did interview Heather Gay from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake, and she told us a little bit about garments. And I thought that I understood. I thought I understood what garments were all about. And I just have to say, and I was telling Nippy this, like, and it's going to be different for a woman. I stupidly, like, I pictured the long, and I want you to explain better, but like in my mind, I pictured the sort of the long underwear vibe. I thought that women could also wear like underwear under their like long johns is what I was picturing.
Yeah.
And then like the long johns on top of or underneath the bra. Heather says, ladies, wear them underneath, just to wear your bra normally, whatever. My point is like, I'd never considered how hard it would be. I'm sorry, Nippy, it's going to be a little TMI graphic as a woman.
This is all TMI. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is a whole TMI kind of topic.
Yeah.
And I think I can handle it.
As a woman, I'm thinking about like, where does the pad go? And how, like, what fabric is this? And then like all the different infections and things that can happen. Okay, let's do this. Let's pause here, come back on Thursday, and we are going to get a full download about what the garments are, the history, the background, the markings, the meanings, all of the different things that this fascinating survey taught you and can teach the reader. We won't say everything because obviously we want people to read the book, and I'm sure this will become the penultimate source for all things garment moving forward. How's that sound?
Sounds like a great first episode.
Come back on Thursday to hear everything you've always wanted to know about garments and were afraid to ask.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.